Here, and I'm delighted to be here, and I will out myself immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, I am an imposter. I constantly wait for my Form 1 maths teacher, Mrs. Glass, to appear and say, "You've managed to get away with it so far, but your time's run out." And I think there are an awful lot of women, particularly, although it happens to men too, who go along in life achieving, but thinking that actually they are going to be found out. So how many of you feel sometimes like you are that imposter? Oh, yes. Can I just tell you that you are an audience of high achievers? If you are a low achiever, you never think about being an imposter. Yes, you'd never thought about it like that, have you? So, and you can see that for yourself. The truth of that is revealed on things like Britain's Got Talent. When you see people with no talent who think that they clearly have lots of talent. So, now you might think that the imposter syndrome sounds like a thing that the Daily Mail made up. It is actually a proper thing. Imposter syndrome was named by a couple of psychologists. If you want the citation, it's Pauline Clance and Suzanne Innes in 1978. But I am quite sure that prior to 1978, Cleopatra probably thought that she had imposter syndrome. So what are the typical attributes? How can you spot someone who has imposter syndrome? And I want you to mentally tick these things off as I go through them. So first of all, you are a super hard worker. Why are you a super hard worker? Why?
You don't want to disappoint anybody.
You don't want to disappoint, she said. And actually, you work hard because it's the only way to stay ahead of you being found out. Because if you don't work really hard, and actually harder than anybody else, you are going to be found out. So for me, I have this constant frenetic round of moving from one thing to another. And if somebody says, "Oh, Vivienne, your life is extraordinarily varied," I just say, well, if I move quickly enough, nobody is ever going to find me out, that I can't really do it. And I've just escaped by the skin of my teeth from being discovered. And then I always say that I'm going to do things, and I afterwards think, why on earth did you agree to do that? So the worst one like that. So I think my particular imposter syndrome stems from my very poor maths. How many of you feel that their maths is poor? I think there's an interesting correlation between women's fear of maths and imposter syndrome. Because certainly when I was at school, I was told that if you couldn't do maths, you were not very bright. And so I've always thought that because I can't do maths, I'm really not very bright. So imagine that you get a call one day and it's the Norwegian Academy of Sciences. And I've done some stuff with them, and they're really nice people, and Oslo's lovely. And they said, would you present the prizes and interview the winners of the Arbel Prize? Well, I had no idea what the Arbel Prize, but I've already said yes, and I'm busy Googling. It's the second most important maths prize in the world. And I found myself interviewing John Nash, he of A Beautiful Mind, and I had to sweat on non-differential equations for, well, months and months and months in case I got found out. Luckily, actually, nobody had a clue what he was talking about. It wasn't about maths at all. And I just had to do that broadcasting thing of saying, that's really interesting, Professor Nash. But what I've always wanted to ask you, anyway, so you are a super hard worker. How many of you would say, actually, you think you probably work harder than most people? Oh, you see, they don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit it, but they actually... So, do you think that you've got where you've got because of luck? How many? I'm busy seeing lots of nods. Yeah, you thought it was a fluke, didn't you? You just happened to be in the right place at the right time. No contribution of your own talent. You just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So, yes, there are all sorts of things like that that have happened to me. So I got into the BBC and presented a programme called Tomorrow's World. And if you're under about 40, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's an iconic BBC science programme. And I saw an advert in The Guardian, and it said, television presenters wanted, must have evidence of science communication skills. So I wrote this ridiculous letter saying that on any night of the week I was to be found in twilight rest homes for the elderly, talking to them about nuclear magnetic resonance. And they said, because I worked for a medical research charity at the time, and they said, well, we'd like to see you. Send us a showreel. And the showreel is all clips of, and I didn't have one because I'd never done any TV. And then they said, there was a lot of sort of arguing. They said, well, why can't you provide the footage? And I said, well, the broadcasters can't make it available in the time, which wasn't exactly a fib, because there wasn't any footage to be made available. So they called me in, and 4,000 people had applied for the job, and there I was. And halfway, and I was thrilled to have got into the building even. And halfway through the interview, the editor said what I'd been dreading was, exactly how much presenting experience have you got, Vivienne? And I thought for a bit, I said, well, on a scale of not very much to bugger all, I said it veers towards the bugger all, actually. And there was this silence, and I thought, right, that's it, I'm out. And then they said, well, we better send you off to make a film. So I went straight from running a charity to being primetime television. So you can imagine that I always thought that it was a complete fluke that I'd got into the BBC. And I did, I suppose, attribute it all to luck. But actually, I'm going to come on to some practical solutions, it's not luck. Although there's a bit of you that says, oh, it is really. But I always remember being given the key to the star dressing room. And I ran across the foyer of the BBC because I thought, I am going to be stopped. They are going to say, it's all been a terrible mistake. And I was waiting for Mrs. Glass to pop out. Mrs. Glass features much in this. She was my former maths teacher, and I did a series for the BBC called Am I Normal? So the idea was, you know, am I very, very tidy, or have I got obsessive compulsive disorder? You know, where is the dividing line? And I did one about maths, you know, am I just don't concentrate, poor teaching, or have I got dyscalculia? And I did a bit of stuff in an MRI scanner, and where everyone else does their sums is not where I do my sums. But I was talking about how Mrs. Glass had made me stand up and in a corner because I couldn't do my 7 times table. And I remember sobbing in that corner on that chair. And do you know what? 6 women called the BBC Action Line and said, was it Mrs. Glass of Rooksbury Park? And do you know, it was. So, and here's another thing, and this applies particularly to women. You are super charming. Yeah, you see, look at those little smiles of recognition. Yes, you are. You are super charming. And you have developed charm in order to do what you need to get done. And the trouble with that approach, which is great, but the trouble with that approach is that you then attribute any advance you've made, oh, it's just because I was nice. Oh, it's just because I was a bit friendly. Or I was a bit sympathetic. You know, there was nothing to do with my talent. You know, they just thought that I, you know, talked a nice game, or I was, you know, I was able to talk to other people properly. So you're a super hard worker. You've convinced yourself that you're really not that intelligent. You've attributed any advance you've made to luck or fluke, or to you being charming. How many of you fit that profile? How many of you fit that profile? Yes, yes. So, the classic imposter is outwardly very successful. So, we only see imposter syndrome in the high achieving, as I've said. And about what proportion do you think of people think they have imposter syndrome? Any ideas? So there are some numbers behind this. Any data freaks here? There are proper numbers behind this. And it's quite a widely studied phenomenon. About 2 out of 5 highly successful people say that they feel an imposter. And if you want the Daily Mail column of shame, that's on the right-hand side, you know, all those awful stories, these are people who've all said they suffer from imposter syndrome. Sheryl Sandberg, Emma Watson of Hogwarts fame, Tina Fey, the comedian, Margaret Chan, director of WHO, for heaven's sake, Michelle Pfeiffer, Sonia Sotomayor, who was the Supreme Court judge in the States. So all these high-achieving people say that they feel like an imposter. So, how about thinking in a different way? Because I suspect that a lot of you will think that any failure in your life is actually confirmation that you were right all along. Right? Oh yeah, look, you see. Because there you are, you're outwardly successful, but inside you're bricking it. You think, oh my God, what am I doing? Here is a really uncomfortable place. But the trouble with imposter syndrome, and the reason why I think it's a big problem, particularly for women, is that it holds you back. Because you don't go for things that you think you might fail at, because you think you are finally going to be found out and revealed as that shabby, not very bright, no-hoper that perhaps you think you are inside. Whereas, what does the rest of the world see? The rest of the world sees a highly successful, competent person. There's a lot of nods here. So, I think one of the problems is that we have unrealistic notions of what being successful is about. So, we think that other people are much more successful and they aren't having these same sort of worries. Well, if 2 out of 5 successful people are having them, and that's all the time, by the way, about 80% of people, successful people, will say that they feel an imposter some of the time. So, how do you deal with it? I think that you have to, first of all, talk to other people. So that's why today is really important. You need to talk to other people because it's only in talking to other people that you realise that actually everyone else is like you. Did you dress for the wall? You look at that. She looks gorgeous against that wall. She's just a perfect match. It's fantastic. So, the other reason I think that it's a major problem, and I saw this a lot at UCL, where I was very involved in Athena SWAN, is that, and this applies to women, but it also applies to men as well, is that you will not apply for a job that is stretching because you fear failure. And typically what you see is there'll be a list of 10 requirements for a job, and there's only one that you don't meet. And whereas others would just say, oh, sod it, I'll learn on the job on that, you say, oh, I really shouldn't apply for that because I can't do this incy-wincy piece of the job. So you don't apply. So it does hold people back. I think that part of the solution to being an imposter is that you need to accept that you might fail. You have to accept that you might fail and that failing isn't bad. One of the greatest problems we have in entrepreneurship and innovation, for example, is that failure is regarded as bad, whereas actually you need to fail in order to get better. But we're very frightened of failure and think that it will reveal to others what we've always been trying to keep hidden. Here's a good idea, I think, is keep track of compliments. Now, people with imposter syndrome are very bad at accepting compliments. And what happens is somebody says you've done a really good job and you say, well, it was lucky, you know, we didn't have a disaster, that this didn't happen, that didn't happen, you know, it could all go wrong next time. And you kind of deflect compliments. Hands up if you're not very good at accepting compliments. Yeah, you see. So what you have, who will accept a compliment? Okay, she will accept a compliment. So tell me what you say when somebody compliments you.
Usually just thank you.
Okay, so this lady says, I just say thank you. How hard would that be for you to do that, eh? You just say thank you. You don't say, oh, but I was really lucky, or, you know, you know, yes, well, you know, I'm not that great, but, you know, somebody else could have done it better. Anyone could have done, that's a great line. Anyone could have done the same. No, they bloody couldn't. You did it. So, here's another thing, is this thing about failing and, you know, constantly being on this treadwheel trying to keep ahead of failing. And you have an idea in your mind that other people know what they're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, they don't. They really, really don't know what they're doing. They might give that impression. And had you ever thought that actually how people are viewing you is that they think that you know what you're doing? Had you ever thought of it like that? So I think you need to keep a log of your compliments. Not in a kind of, you know, slightly stalkerish, strange way, but actually when somebody writes you a note and says, thank you, you did a great job, what you do is you put it in a secret folder on your computer, labelled for darker days. And that's the folder that you look into to remind yourself that actually you are doing a great job. And can I also say that the other side of that coin is that you need always to tell people when they've done something well and write them a little note. It's a really small thing, but actually it's a key to developing someone else and helping them get up that ladder and develop confidence. So, you keep a track of your compliments, you talk to other people, just like we're talking now, you accept that you might fail and you're not really alarmed by it, and you also understand that nobody knows what they're doing, especially with regard to Brexit. So, and the final thing is that do not think that the jobs that are stretching and that are difficult are ones that are beyond you. You have to take your heart in your hand and just go for it, because those jobs are not beyond you. They really are not. And if you do that, I think that you will be making a fair old pass at overcoming imposter syndrome, although you will still have days when you are really worried that that person is going to come around the door and unmask you. And can I just tell you that it doesn't go away with age? I am far older than most of you, and it hasn't gone away. But the thing that I do to stop myself is I say, I am going to do things which are utterly ridiculous. So when I get a phone call, I always say yes to whatever the job is, within reason. Because I think that, and I say, look, I've never done this before. And people say, okay, that's fine. And it's quite surprising. And then you go and do it, and you learn on the job, and you really enjoy it, and you get away with it.